The morning sun smashed against the glass facade of the Sterling corporate tower, turning the skyscraper into a blinding pillar of fire and gold that dominated the city skyline. It was a monument to excess, a place where fortunes were made in seconds and the problems of the common world were filtered out by climate control and security guards. Into this fortress of wealth walked 12-year-old Bella Vance. She looked like a glitch in the perfect matrix of a lobby. Her sneakers were gray with dust. The laces knotted 3 times because they had snapped weeks ago. Her backpack, a faded pink thing that had seen 4 school years, hung lopsided off one shoulder, the strap held together by a safety pin. She clutched a thick, weathered brown envelope to her chest with both hands, her knuckles white from the grip. She was terrified. The air inside the lobby smelled of lemons and expensive cologne, a sharp contrast to the damp, musty scent of the small apartment she shared with her grandmother. Every step she took on the marble floor squeaked, a high-pitched announcement of her intrusion that made the suited men and women glancing up from their phones frown in confusion. Before we dive into this powerful story of integrity and the unexpected consequences of doing the right thing, if you believe that honesty is still the most valuable currency in the world, please hit that subscribe button for Prime Stories. Join our family, and let's keep spreading hope together. Bella had walked 4 miles to get here. She didn't have money for the bus, and even if she did, she probably would have saved it for bread. The envelope burned against her chest. She had found it 3 days ago, sitting forgotten on a wooden bench in Riverside Park, where she sometimes sat to watch the ducks because it was the only entertainment that didn't cost anything. Most people would have walked past it. Some might have opened it, taken whatever was inside, and thrown the rest in the trash. Bella had picked it up, feeling the weight of the papers inside, and known instantly that it mattered to someone. She had spent 2 afternoons at the public library, fighting with a slow computer, typing in the address stamped faintly on the back flap. It had led her here, to the heart of the financial district, to the office of a man named Marcus Sterling. She didn't know who he was, but the building bore his name, so she assumed he was important. She wasn't here for a reward. She was here because her grandmother, who could barely walk but had a spine made of iron, had taught her that what isn't yours burns your hands until you let it go. The elevator ride was a nausea-inducing ascent that made her ears pop. When the doors slid open on the top floor, Bella stepped out into a world so sterile and white it hurt her eyes. A receptionist with perfect hair and a headset looked at her with the kind of disdain usually reserved for insects. "Delivery?" the receptionist asked, not bothering to hide her annoyance. "No," Bella whispered, her voice trembling. "I found this. I need to return it to Mr. Sterling." The receptionist blinked, then sighed, pointing a manicured finger down a long hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than Bella's entire neighborhood. "Into the hall. Make it quick. He's in a mood." Bella nodded, clutching the envelope tighter. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She felt small, dirty, and out of place, but the weight of the envelope anchored her. She walked past glass walls where people yelled into phones and typed furiously, her dusty sneakers leaving faint prints on the plush carpet. She reached the double doors at the end, took a deep breath that tasted of recycled air, and pushed them open. Marcus Sterling sat behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single block of obsidian. He was younger than she expected, perhaps in his 30s, with a face that was handsome but sharp like a blade. He was typing on a laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't look up when she entered. Bella stood there for a long, agonizing minute, shifting her weight from one aching foot to the other. "Excuse me?" she finally squeaked. Marcus stopped typing. He looked up slowly, his eyes scanning her from her messy hair to her worn-out shoes. He didn't smile. "Who let a child in here?" he asked, his voice flat and cold. He looked past her, expecting a parent or a security guard. "I'm here to return this," Bella said, stepping forward and placing the brown envelope on the edge of his pristine desk. "I found it in the park." Marcus looked at the envelope, stained, wrinkled, ordinary. Then he looked at Bella. A smirk began to curl the corner of his lip. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a rabbit that had wandered into its den. He picked up the envelope with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. He didn't open it. He didn't check the contents. He just held it up, dangling it in the air. "You found this," he repeated, his tone mocking. "And you walked all the way up here to bring me trash?" He dropped it back on the desk with a dismissive thud. "Let me guess. You open it. I find a drawing of a pony. And then you ask me for $5. Bella felt her face burn. "No, sir. I didn't open it. It has your company address on it." Marcus leaned back in his leather chair and started to laugh. It was a loud, barking sound that echoed off the glass walls. His assistant, a young man in a blue suit who had been standing in the corner, started chuckling too, taking his cue from the boss. "Kid, I receive thousands of documents a week," Marcus said through his laughter. "If it was important, it wouldn't be in a dirty brown envelope, and it certainly wouldn't be brought to me by a street urchin. This is a prank, right? Where's the camera?" He looked around the room, performing for an audience that wasn't there, treating Bella's act of integrity like a punchline to a joke she didn't understand. The laughter was physically painful, striking Bella with more force than a slap. She stood rooted to the spot, her hands hanging uselessly by her sides. She had expected skepticism, maybe even anger, but she hadn't expected to be treated like a circus act. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, hot and stinging, but she refused to let them fall. Her grandmother had told her never to cry in front of people who didn't respect her. "It's not a prank," Bella insisted, her voice shaking but gaining a desperate edge. "I tracked the address. I walked from the east side. It took me 2 hours." Marcus wiped a tear of mirth from his eye, shaking his head. 2 hours? For this? He tapped the envelope again. "You should have saved your shoe leather, kid. Time is money, and you just wasted a lot of both." The cruelty in his voice was casual, effortless. To him, she was just a momentary distraction from his spreadsheets, a bit of color in his gray day. He didn't see the hunger in her frame or the pride in her posture. He only saw inconvenience. Bella looked at the envelope sitting on the dark desk. She thought about just turning around and running. She could leave it there. She had done her part. Why did she care if he believed her? But a stubbornness flared in her chest. She remembered the weight of the papers inside. They felt heavy, dense, important. "You should look inside," she said, her voice quiet. Marcus stopped laughing. His eyes narrowed. He didn't like being told what to do, especially by a child who looked like she dressed from a donation bin. "I think you should leave," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "before I call security and have you escorted out for trespassing." The assistant stepped forward, reaching for the phone. "I'll handle it, Mr. Sterling." Bella's heart sank. She had failed. She had tried to be good, to be honest, and all it had gotten her was humiliation. She took a step back, her shoulders slumping. Maybe the world was just as mean as everyone said it was. Maybe her grandmother was wrong. Just as the assistant reached for the receiver, the heavy oak doors of the office swung open again. The movement was slow, labored, accompanied by the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of a wooden cane against the floor. A man stepped inside. He was old, frail, with skin like parchment paper and a suit that hung loosely on his frame, as if he had shrunk inside it over the years. His hair was a shock of wild silver, and thick glasses magnified his eyes. This was Elias Thorne, a retired architect and one of the original founders of the firm, a man whose name was whispered with reverence in the industry, but who rarely visited the office anymore. He stopped in the doorway, leaning heavily on his cane, his breathing ragged. He looked around the room, confused by the tension, until his eyes landed on the desk. They widened behind the thick lenses. He didn't look at Marcus. He didn't look at the assistant. He looked at the dirty, wrinkled brown envelope. "Where?" Elias's voice was a rasp, a whisper of disbelief. He shuffled forward, moving faster than his legs seemed capable of carrying him. "Where did you get that?" Marcus stood up immediately, his arrogant posture vanishing into a facade of respect. "Mr. Thorne, I didn't know you were coming in today. This is nothing. Just some local kid trying to pull a scam. We were just removing her." He reached out to sweep the envelope into the trash bin, eager to clean up the mess. "Don't you touch it," Elias roared. The sound was shocking coming from such a frail body. Marcus froze, his hand hovering in midair. Elias reached the desk, his trembling hands hovering over the brown paper as if it were a holy relic. He turned slowly to look at Bella. For the first time since she entered the building, someone looked at her with something other than contempt. "Did you bring this?" Elias asked, his voice trembling. Bella nodded, terrified. "Yes, sir. I found it on a bench in Riverside Park. I didn't open it. I promise." Elias stared at her, his eyes searching her face for the truth. He saw the dust on her shoes. He saw the fear in her eyes. He saw the absolute, unwavering honesty that radiated from her. He turned back to the envelope and undid the clasp with shaking fingers. He pulled out the contents. It wasn't money. It wasn't a contract. It was a stack of yellowed, hand-drawn blueprints, smelling of old graphite and dreams. There were notes in the margins, sketches of archways and domes, details of a building that looked like a palace. Elias let out a sob, a raw, guttural sound of relief that silenced the room. He pressed the papers to his chest, closing his eyes. "I thought I had lost them," he whispered. "I sat on the bench to feed the pigeons. I got up. I forgot. My life's work." Marcus looked from the old man to the girl, his face draining of color. He realized, with a sinking feeling in his gut, that he had made a catastrophic error. "Sir," Marcus stammered, "I assumed it was junk mail." "It looks, well, look at it." Elias turned to Marcus, and the look in his eyes was withering. "You judge everything by its wrapper, Marcus. That is why you are a good accountant and a terrible human being." He turned his back on the billionaire, dismissing him entirely, and focused all his attention on the 12-year-old girl standing in her dusty sneakers. "Child," Elias said softly, "do you know what these are?" Bella shook her head. "No, sir. Just papers." Elias smiled, and it transformed his face. "These are the original plans for the City Heritage Library. The restoration project begins next month. Without these, we would have had to tear it down. You didn't just return papers. You saved history." The silence in the office was profound, heavy with the weight of shifting power dynamics. Marcus Sterling, usually the sun around which this corporate solar system revolved, stood in the shadows, his face a mask of shame. He fidgeted with his cufflinks, unable to meet the gaze of the little girl he had mocked moments ago. Elias Thorne ignored him completely, dragging a heavy leather chair over to Bella. "Sit, please," he insisted, his voice gentle. Bella sat, the leather cool and smooth against her legs. She felt like she was floating. "You walked here?" Elias asked, sitting on the edge of the desk, disregarding the propriety of the office. "Yes, sir," Bella whispered. "From the east side." Elias shook his head in wonder. "Why? Why not just leave it? Why come all this way?" Bella looked down at her hands, twisting the hem of her frayed shirt. "My grandmother says that if you keep what isn't yours, you lose a piece of your soul. And, well, I thought someone might be sad they lost it." Elias's eyes filled with tears. He reached out and covered her small, rough hand with his paper-thin one. "Your grandmother is a wise woman, and you are a remarkable young lady." He looked up at Marcus then, his expression hardening. Marcus apologized. The command was simple, quiet, and absolute. Marcus swallowed hard. He walked around the desk, his expensive Italian shoes making no sound on the carpet. He stood in front of Bella, stripping away his ego layer by layer. I am sorry," he said, his voice stiff but sincere. "I judged you. I was wrong. I was cruel. And I apologize." Bella looked up at him. She could have been angry. She could have gloated. Instead, she just nodded. "It's okay," she said. "Just maybe look inside next time." It was a simple rebuke, but it hit Marcus harder than any scream could have. He nodded, humbled by a child who possessed more grace in her pinky finger than he had in his entire bank account. Elias turned back to Bella. "What is your name?" "Bella Vance." "Well, Bella Vance," Elias said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a card. "I cannot pay you for what these papers are worth, because they are priceless. But I can make sure that honesty like yours is never punished by poverty again." He wrote something on the back of the card. "I sit on the board of the City Academy. It is the best school in the state. Starting this semester, you have a full scholarship. Tuition, books, uniforms, meals, everything covered until you graduate university. Bella's mouth fell open. I can't. Elias held up a hand. It is not a gift. It is an investment. The world needs architects, Bella. But more than that, it needs people who build on strong foundations. People like you. He then looked at Marcus. And Marcus? Marcus jumped. Yes, sir. You will ensure her grandmother's apartment is renovated. Safe wiring, proper heating, and you will pay for it personally. Consider it a penalty for your lack of vision. Marcus nodded quickly. Done. Consider it done. Elias stood up, wincing slightly as he put weight on his cane, but his smile remained bright. Come, Bella. I will drive you home. I want to meet this grandmother of yours. He offered her his arm, treating her not like a poor child, but like a visiting dignitary. Bella stood up, hoisting her faded backpack onto her shoulder. She felt lighter, as if the gravity in the room had changed. She looked at Marcus one last time. He wasn't laughing anymore. He was watching her with a look of genuine respect, perhaps even awe. He opened the door for them, holding it wide. As Bella walked past him, he murmured, "Thank you." And he meant it. They walked out of the office, past the confused receptionist, past the people yelling into phones, past the abstract art. But the building didn't feel intimidating anymore. It felt like a place where she belonged. They stepped into the elevator, and as the doors closed on the gleaming white hallway, Bella felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the heating system. It was the feeling of being seen. They walked out of the lobby and into the bright midday sun. The city noise rushed to meet them. Honking taxis, shouting vendors, the rhythm of life moving forward. But Bella moved differently now. She didn't walk with her head down. She walked with her chin up. She had walked into the lion's den armed only with her integrity, and she had walked out a winner. She thought of her grandmother waiting at home, worrying about the electricity bill. She thought about the scholarship. She thought about the future. As she climbed into Elias's waiting car, she realized that the envelope hadn't just contained blueprints for a building. It had contained the blueprints for her life. She had returned a lost thing, and in doing so, she had been found. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that the smallest act of honesty can echo louder than a billionaire's laughter, please like this video and share it with someone you love. And don't forget to subscribe to Prime Stories. Together, we can build a world where kindness is the only currency that matters. Kindness lives on,